My name is Alfred, and I am 32 years old. I have always believed that privacy outweighs flashiness. My family has no idea about my success in tech, and I prefer it that way. Something about family dinners always brings out the worst in people, especially when my sister Rebecca introduces her wealthy fiancé, Cameron. That night, their mockery of my modest lifestyle reached unbearable levels until one casual question about a jet changed everything. Before I dive into this story of sweet revenge and complicated family dynamics, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want more stories about keeping it real in a fake world. I grew up in a middle-class family in suburban Boston. Our neighborhood was nice enough, with decent schools and safe streets. Nothing fancy, but comfortable. My parents worked hard, my dad as an insurance salesman, and my mom as a high school teacher. We never wanted for necessities, but luxuries were rare and earned. My sister Rebecca is 3 years younger than me, and growing up, we were inseparable despite our different personalities. Rebecca was always the social butterfly, extroverted and charming, with a natural ability to work a room that I both admired and found exhausting. I was the quieter one, analytical and thoughtful, preferring deep conversations with one person over small talk with many. Despite these differences, we understood each other in a way only siblings can. When I was 14 and Rebecca 11, our parents hit a rough financial patch. Dad lost his job during company downsizing, and for almost a year, things were tight. Really tight. Rebecca and I shared everything during that time, from school supplies to the burden of seeing worry etched on our parents' faces. We made a pact then, sitting in our shared backyard treehouse that Dad built before money got scarce. No matter what happens when we grow up, Rebecca had said, her pinky finger extended toward mine, we will always have each other's backs. Rich or poor, successful or struggling. Always, I agreed, linking my pinky with hers. No judgment, just support. That promise carried us through high school and college, even as our paths began to naturally diverge. Rebecca pursued marketing with a laser focus on image and connections. She joined all the right clubs, networked relentlessly, and built her personal brand with precision. I watched her Instagram following grow as she positioned herself as an up-and-coming marketing guru with just the right mix of aspirational content and carefully curated authenticity. Meanwhile, I followed my interest in computer science and cybersecurity. While Rebecca was building her social network, I was building lines of code. After graduation, I joined a small tech startup focused on data security software. The work was challenging and fulfilling, but not glamorous by any stretch. I lived in a small apartment, drove a used car, and invested whatever I could back into my skills and a few carefully researched stocks. Then came the twist that changed my financial future. Our little startup developed an encryption algorithm that caught the attention of several major tech companies. After a bidding war that left all of us in shock, we sold the company for 9 figures. My share, after taxes, was substantial enough to set me up for life several times over. The thing is, I never told my family. Not because I wanted to deceive them, but because I knew how money changes relationships. I developed a philosophy about wealth early on. True wealth is freedom, not consumption. The freedom to choose how I spend my time. The freedom to help others anonymously. The freedom to live according to my values rather than societal expectations. So I continued driving my 2008 Toyota, lived in a modest but comfortable home in a normal neighborhood, and channeled my wealth into strategic investments, including a private aviation business that combines my love of technology with practical transportation solutions. My philanthropic work remained anonymous, funding educational programs in underserved communities and backing environmental conservation efforts. I lived comfortably, but without ostentation. I had everything I needed and nothing I did not want. To me, this was the ultimate luxury. I kept my success private for several reasons. First, I value authenticity in relationships and hate the idea of being treated differently because of my bank account. Second, I had seen how wealth transformed other people's families, creating expectations, jealousy, and complicated dynamics. And finally, I just never saw the appeal of showing off. The people who would be impressed by displays of wealth were rarely the people I wanted in my life anyway. As Rebecca's career progressed, she moved further into the world of luxury marketing. Her Instagram became a showcase of designer clothes, exclusive restaurants, and exotic vacations, all carefully framed as part of her professional expertise rather than simple bragging. Our parents ate it up, proudly sharing her posts and talking about her successes at every opportunity. I was genuinely happy for her success, even if her values had shifted from our childhood promises. Then came Cameron. I first heard about him through my mother's excited phone calls. Cameron was an investment banker with the right pedigree, connections, and ambitions. They met at a charity gala that cost more per plate than my monthly grocery budget. From the photos Rebecca shared, he was conventionally handsome in that Wall Street way. All perfect teeth, expensive haircuts, and tailored suits. Within 6 months, they were engaged, and my mother could barely contain her excitement about the ring, the proposal location, and most importantly, Cameron's family connections. "Alfred, you would not believe their summer home in the Hamptons," my mother gushed over the phone. "And his parents know the governor personally." I made appropriate noises of interest, while wondering when family connections had become more important to my mother than character. But I kept those thoughts to myself. Rebecca seemed happy, and that was what mattered. When the invitation came for a family dinner to celebrate the engagement formally, I hesitated. Our family gatherings had grown increasingly uncomfortable as the focus shifted more and more towards status and appearances. But hope springs eternal, and part of me thought that perhaps this milestone might bring us closer again. Maybe Rebecca would be so secure in her happiness that the competitive edge would soften. Maybe my parents would be so focused on the engagement that they would forget to make subtle digs about my career choices or dating life. So I accepted the invitation and even bought a new button-up shirt for the occasion, though I drew the line at replacing my comfortable jeans and trusted sneakers. I prepared mentally for the evening, rehearsing responses to inevitable questions about my work and personal life. I decided to be positive, focus on celebrating Rebecca's happiness, and avoid rising to any bait about my lifestyle choices. Family is family, after all. And despite everything, I loved them and wanted to maintain those bonds. The night of the dinner, I drove to my parents' suburban mansion, a recent upgrade funded partially by Rebecca and Cameron as an early inheritance gift, so they could enjoy the status while still alive, as my mother frankly explained. I pulled into the circular driveway, parking my trusty Toyota between a gleaming Mercedes and an Audi SUV. The contrast was stark. My car's faded paint and minor dents, a visual representation of our family's diverging values. As I approached the grand entrance, I felt a twinge of self-consciousness about my casual attire compared to what I knew would await me inside. But I reminded myself that authentic relationships should not require designer labels, and steeled myself for the evening ahead. I rang the doorbell, shifting the bottle of wine I had brought from one hand to the other, and waited for the door to open on this next chapter of family dynamics. Despite everything, a small part of me still hoped for connection, understanding, and the unconditional love that families are supposed to represent. I held on to that hope as I heard footsteps approaching the door. The door swung open to reveal my mother, her hair freshly colored and styled, wearing a cocktail dress that probably cost more than all the clothes in my closet combined. "Alfred!" she exclaimed, her eyes quickly scanning my outfit with barely concealed disappointment. "You made it. And you are wearing jeans." "Good to see you too, Mom," I said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "You look nice." I brought wine. She accepted the bottle, glancing at the label with a slight frown before her social smile returned. "How thoughtful. Come in. Everyone is already here." I followed her through the marble-floored foyer into the formal living room where my father, Rebecca, and a man I assumed was Cameron were gathered around holding crystal glasses of something amber-colored. "Look who finally arrived," my mother announced, and 3 pairs of eyes turned toward me. My father rose from his leather armchair with a stiff smile. "Son, glad you could make it." His handshake was firm but brief, a business greeting rather than a familial one. Rebecca hurried over, air kissing near my cheek, to avoid disturbing her perfect makeup. "Alfred, I was beginning to think you would bail on us." She looked radiant in an expensive-looking dress, her engagement ring catching the light with every gesture. "Would not miss it, Becca," I said, using my childhood nickname for her. "Congratulations." She stepped back, linking her arm through the tall man who had approached. "Alfred, this is Cameron, my fiancé." Cameron extended his hand with practiced charm, his grip just slightly too firm. The mysterious brother at last. "Rebecca says you do something with computers?" His tone suggested he was asking if I collected garbage for a living, but I maintained my smile. "Cybersecurity consulting," I said. My standard simplified explanation. "Fascinating," Cameron replied in a way that indicated it was anything but. His eyes performed the same assessment my mother's had, taking in my casual clothes, and clearly finding them wanting. "Always good to have someone to call when the Wi-Fi goes down, right?" Rebecca laughed a bit too loudly while I forced a polite smile. Already I could see how different she was around him. More artificial, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, constantly checking his reactions. "Drink?" my father asked, already moving toward the bar cart. "Just water for now, thanks," I replied. "Oh, come on," Cameron interjected. "We are celebrating. At least have some scotch." "This is an 18-year Macallan." I relented to avoid making a scene, accepting a glass with a modest pour. "Cheers to your engagement," I offered, raising my glass. "And to many successful years ahead," Cameron added with a wink at my father, who beamed with approval. The pre-dinner conversation quickly established the tone for the evening. My mother insisted on giving me a tour of the recent renovations, pointing out design elements and name-dropping the decorator who had apparently worked with several minor celebrities. "And this light fixture," she said, gesturing to a chandelier that looked like an exploding glass porcupine, was handcrafted in Italy. Rebecca and Cameron found it on their trip to Milan last spring. "It is certainly unique," I offered. "It cost as much as a small car," my mother whispered, as if this were its most impressive feature. Back in the living room, the conversation had turned to vacations. Cameron was describing their recent trip to Bali in exhaustive detail. From the private villa to the exclusive restaurants that you cannot just walk into. You have to know someone. I tried to steer the conversation toward more substantial topics several times. "Have you followed the developments in renewable energy lately?" I asked during a brief lull. "Some fascinating breakthroughs happening." My question was met with blank stares before Cameron smoothly redirected. "Speaking of energy, the spa treatments in Bali are incredible for rejuvenation. Rebecca and I did this couples massage that used volcanic stones and rare oils. Throughout it all, Rebecca kept finding reasons to extend her left hand, ensuring her engagement ring remained the focal point of the room. The Rebecca I grew up with, who once spent hours helping me build a fort in the woods behind our old house, seemed to have vanished entirely. "So, Alfred," my mother asked as we finally moved toward the dining room, "are you seeing anyone special these days?" "Not currently," I replied honestly. "Work keeps me pretty busy," my father snorted. "What kind of busy can computer work be? You sit at a desk all day." Before I could respond, Cameron jumped in. "I have a cousin in IT. Always complaining about being overworked but seems to spend half his day playing video games." He laughed, and my father joined in. "Alfred has always marched to his own drummer," my mother added with a tight smile. "Not everyone is suited for the more ambitious paths." I felt my jaw tighten, but reminded myself of my resolution to stay positive. Different definitions of success, I guess. Speaking of success, Rebecca interjected, clearly eager to change the subject. "Cameron just got promoted to senior vice president, and just like that, the conversation shifted back to safer territory for them, leaving me feeling like an outsider at my own family dinner." As we sat down at the immaculately set dining table, I caught a brief, unguarded moment when Rebecca looked at me with an expression that reminded me of her younger self, a flicker of the sister I had been so close to. It vanished quickly as Cameron placed his hand over hers, but it was enough to give me hope that somewhere underneath all the performance, my sister was still in there. I resolved to make the best of the evening, to find moments of genuine connection if possible, and to maintain my dignity regardless. I still loved my family, despite their shallow focus and judgmental attitudes, and I was genuinely interested in getting to know the man my sister had chosen, even if my first impressions were less than favorable. As the first course was served, I reminded myself that family relationships are complicated, but valuable. I would try once more to find common ground, to connect beyond the superficial trappings that seem to have consumed them. But as Cameron launched into a story about his recent helicopter skiing trip, I knew it would be an uphill battle. Dinner began with an elaborately plated salad that had more decorative elements than actual food. As we ate, the conversation shifted to Cameron's recent promotion. The youngest senior VP in company history, he mentioned casually, though clearly he had been waiting for the opportunity to share this fact. The CEO actually called me personally to deliver the news. "We are so proud," my mother gushed. "Such an accomplishment." "That is great," I offered genuinely. "What will your new responsibilities include?" Cameron waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, strategic oversight, bigger client portfolios, the usual stepping stone to the executive floor." He clearly had no interest in discussing the actual work. Rebecca jumped in. "We have already started looking at bigger condos. The one we have is gorgeous. But with Cameron's new position, we need something more suitable for entertaining. The place we saw yesterday has floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the park," Cameron added. 3,000 square feet of pure luxury." My father nodded approvingly. "Smart investment. Property in that area only appreciates." "Speaking of investments," my mother segued, "we have finally been accepted at Oakmont Country Club. The waiting list was over 2 years, but it turns out the membership committee chairman is a client of Cameron's firm." "Connections are everything," Cameron agreed with a self-satisfied smile. I took a sip of water, searching for something positive to contribute. "I have been doing some volunteer work with a youth coding program recently. It is rewarding to see kids get excited about technology." My comment was met with uncomfortable silence, until my mother said, "How nice," in the same tone she might use to describe someone's unfortunate haircut. "Alfred has always had these charitable interests," Rebecca explained to Cameron, "as if my volunteer work were an eccentric hobby like collecting bottle caps. Remember when he tried to start that recycling program in high school, and no one participated?" My father added with a chuckle. "Actually, it eventually became the district-wide model," I corrected quietly. But no one seemed to hear. The main course arrived. Some kind of deconstructed duck dish that required instructions to eat properly. As we navigated the complicated plating, my mother turned her attention to my personal life. "Alfred, honestly, when are you going to settle down? Rebecca is younger than you and already engaged to a wonderful man." "I am not in any rush," I replied evenly. "I would rather wait for the right connection than force something that is not there." "At your age, you cannot afford to be so picky," my mother continued. "What about Janet Miller's daughter? She is a dental hygienist, very stable career." "Mom, I am 32, not 82. There is plenty of time." "Alfred has always been allergic to commitment," Rebecca told Cameron with a laugh. "Remember that time he had 3 different dates to the winter formal because he could not decide who to ask?" "That is not exactly how it happened," I began, but Rebecca was already launching into the story, embellishing liberally for Cameron's entertainment. "So there he was, trying to dance with 3 different girls without any of them noticing the others. By the end of the night, all 3 were crying in the bathroom, and poor Alfred was hiding by the punch bowl looking like he wanted to drown himself in it." Everyone laughed as I sat there, remembering the actual story was nothing like that. I had asked one girl who had accepted, then gotten confused when 2 others claimed I had asked them as well, due to a miscommunication. It had been an honest mistake that I had felt terrible about, not some player move as Rebecca was now portraying it. "Classic Alfred," my father said, shaking his head. "Always the confused bachelor." Cameron leaned forward, swirling his wine with practiced precision. "You know, if you are ever looking to make a career change, I know several people in tech-adjacent fields who are always looking for people with basic computer knowledge. Nothing too advanced, but steady work, decent benefits." "Thank you, but I am happy with my current position," I said, feeling my shoulders tense. "What exactly is your title these days?" my father asked. "Security consultant," I replied, sticking to my cover story. In reality, I was the majority shareholder and chairman of the board for my aviation technology company, but that was not information I was ready to share. "Consultant," my father repeated, making the word sound vaguely disreputable. "Is that stable?" "It works for me," I said simply. You always were content with just getting by, my mother sighed. Rebecca, on the other hand, has always aimed for the stars. Speaking of stars, Cameron interjected, we were thinking of having the wedding in Santorini. There is this exclusive venue overlooking the caldera that would be just perfect for the aesthetic Rebecca wants. And just like that, I was forgotten again as the conversation shifted to wedding venues, guest lists full of important names, and the designer Rebecca was hoping would create her dress. As they talked, I felt a growing knot in my stomach. Part of me wanted to reveal the truth about my success, to see the shock on their faces when they realized their assumptions had been completely wrong. But another part, the part that valued authenticity, resisted. If I had to prove my worth through my bank account, what would that really accomplish? I found myself thinking back to when Rebecca and I were kids, how she had always stood up for me when others teased me for being the quiet, bookish one. How had we gone from that protective bond to this, where she seemed to take pleasure in positioning herself above me? I tried several more times to steer the conversation to neutral territory, asking about a book I had noticed on their coffee table, commenting on a news story I thought might be of general interest. Each attempt was either ignored or quickly redirected back to the preferred topics of luxury, status, and achievement defined in the narrowest of terms. The physical symptoms of my discomfort grew more pronounced. My shoulders felt like they were touching my ears from tension. I had barely touched my elaborate meal. I kept having flashbacks to childhood moments when Rebecca and I had been a team against the world, building forts, sharing secrets, protecting each other. Alfred barely touched his wagyu, my mother observed with disapproval. It is imported from Japan, you know, probably not used to such refined cuisine, Cameron said with a smirk. My treat, by the way. Thought the family should experience the finer things. So thoughtful. My mother beamed. Alfred prefers his fast food and microwave meals, I imagine, Rebecca added with a laugh that felt like a betrayal of our shared history of making boxed macaroni and cheese together on nights our parents worked late. I appreciate good food, I said quietly. I just have not had much appetite tonight. Speaking of appetites, Cameron said, launching into a story about a business dinner at a 3-Michelin-star restaurant where he had apparently impressed some CEO with his wine knowledge. As dessert was served, an elaborately plated deconstructed tiramisu that looked nothing like the actual dessert, the conversation took an even more uncomfortable turn. I was reading this fascinating article about self-made success, Cameron announced. It made the point that truly successful people are willing to do whatever it takes, make any sacrifice. Those who remain mediocre simply lack the necessary drive. My father nodded enthusiastically. Exactly right. I have always said that winners make their own luck. Some people are content with less, Rebecca said, giving me a look that was somewhere between pity and condescension. Alfred has always been our family's free spirit. Poor, but happy. Right, Alfred? The room seemed to close in around me as they all looked at me with expressions ranging from pity to smugness. This was no longer simple bragging or casual digs. This was direct mockery, and it was becoming unbearable. I would not say poor, I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. I have what I need. Of course you do, dear, my mother said in the same tone she would use to humor a child. And there is nothing wrong with a simple life. We are going to the Caribbean next month, Cameron announced abruptly. St. Bart's. I have a colleague with a villa there. The beaches are pristine, and the best part is that the exclusivity keeps out the tourist crowds. How wonderful, my mother exclaimed. What a dream vacation. As they discussed the details of their upcoming luxury trip, I sat silently, feeling increasingly alienated and hurt. The worst part was seeing how completely Rebecca had transformed from the sister who once promised we would always support each other regardless of where life took us. I considered making an excuse and leaving early, but something in me refused to give them the satisfaction. I had come to celebrate my sister's engagement, and despite everything, I would see the evening through with dignity. As coffee was served in delicate porcelain cups that looked too fragile to actually use, Cameron steered the conversation into even more uncomfortable territory. I was having this conversation at the club the other day about people who lack ambition, he began, swirling the amber liquid in his snifter. It is fascinating from a psychological perspective. Some people just seem wired to accept mediocrity. My father nodded sagely. There are leaders and followers in this world. Always have been. Alfred has never been materialistic, Rebecca said, as if diagnosing a peculiar condition. He drives that same old Toyota he has had forever. The 2008 model, right? Cameron asked with a smirk. I think my housekeeper has the same one. They all chuckled, as if he had said something wildly amusing. Alfred is poor but happy, Rebecca continued, reaching over to pat my hand condescendingly. Aren't you, big brother? I withdrew my hand, feeling a surge of anger that I struggled to contain. I would say I prioritize different things. Speaking of priorities, my mother interjected, Alfred, if you ever need any financial help, you know you can come to us. Family takes care of family. The assumption that I needed their charity was the final straw. But before I could respond, my father launched into a lecture. Son, at some point, you need to grow up and face reality. Life is not some hippie commune, where you can just float along doing the bare minimum. Look at your sister, making something of herself, finding a successful partner. What do you have to show for your life? I sat in silence, not from shame as they clearly assumed, but from restraint. Years of practicing emotional control in business negotiations were the only thing keeping me from upending the entire facade they had built. Cameron, apparently sensing my discomfort and misinterpreting it as embarrassment, decided to show what he thought was kindness. You know, I helped my college roommate's brother find a decent job last year. Nice guy, just needed a hand up. Good worker, just lacked the right opportunities and connections. I could do the same for you, Alfred. My company has an excellent charity initiative for helping the less fortunate. Rebecca beamed at Cameron, as if his condescending offer was the height of generosity. Is not he just the best? Always thinking of others. Alfred could be your company's charity project this year, my mother suggested with what she probably thought was helpful enthusiasm. The table erupted in laughter at my expense, and I felt something inside me shift. I had come here with hopes of family connection, of celebrating my sister's happiness regardless of our different paths. Instead, I had been subjected to hours of mockery, condescension, and outright disrespect. I was considering making an excuse and leaving when the conversation took an unexpected turn that would change everything. The best part about St. Bart's, Cameron was saying, beyond the exclusivity and the beaches, is the people watching at the airport. You would not believe the private jets that come through there. Last month, we saw this gorgeous Gulfstream with a distinctive blue stripe along the fuselage. Absolutely stunning machine. He took a sip of his cognac, then turned to me with what seemed like genuine curiosity for the first time all evening. Actually, Alfred, was not that your Gulfstream at the St. Bart's airport last month? The one with the blue stripe? I noticed the tail number matched the aviation company you are connected with on LinkedIn. The room went completely silent. My mother's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. My father's eyebrows shot up so high, they nearly disappeared into his hairline. Rebecca's mouth literally fell open. Cameron seemed oblivious to the bomb he had just dropped, continuing conversationally. Beautiful aircraft. The G650, right? I have always appreciated fine engineering, whether it is watches, cars, or planes. Every eye at the table was now fixed on me, expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief. The power in the room had suddenly, dramatically shifted, and I found myself at a crossroads. I could continue my policy of privacy, deflect the question, and leave them wondering. Or I could finally pull back the curtain on the success I had kept hidden for years. In that moment of frozen silence, I made my decision. I set my coffee cup down carefully, buying myself a moment to decide exactly how to respond. The silence stretched, heavy with anticipation and confusion. Yes, I finally said, my voice calm and measured. That would be one of our fleet. We keep it based in Miami during the winter months for client convenience. Cameron nodded with genuine interest, seemingly unaware of the bombshell effect his casual question had created. Thought so. Beautiful aircraft. Your LinkedIn says you are with Blue Horizon Aviation? What exactly do you do there? I allowed myself a small smile. I founded the company 3 years ago after selling my security software firm. We provide private aviation services with a focus on technological innovation and environmental efficiency. The silence around the table deepened, if that were possible. My mother's coffee cup still hovered midway to her mouth. My father's expression had transformed from dismissive to calculating in an instant. You own a jet? Rebecca finally managed, her voice higher than normal. A fleet. Actually, I corrected gently. The Gulfstream G 650 is our flagship, but we operate 15 aircraft of various sizes for different client needs. But how? My mother finally lowered her cup, coffee sloshing over the rim unnoticed. I took a measured sip of water before responding. Remember that cybersecurity startup I joined after college? We developed an encryption algorithm that became industry standard. When we sold the company, my share was substantial. Substantial, my father repeated weakly. 9 figures substantial, I clarified, watching his eyes widen. After taxes. Of course. Cameron was the first to recover, seamlessly shifting into networking mode. That is extraordinary, Alfred. I had no idea we had such an entrepreneur in the family. We should definitely talk about potential synergies between our industries. Rebecca looked stunned, her carefully curated image momentarily shattered. Why did you never tell us? All this time, we thought, that I was poor but happy. I finished for her, recalling her words from earlier with pointed precision. She had the grace to flush with embarrassment. My mother finally found her voice. But you drive that old car, and your clothes. I choose to live simply, I explained. I measure wealth by freedom, not possessions. My Toyota is reliable and paid for. My clothes are comfortable. My home is modest, but suits my needs perfectly. But you could have a mansion, sports cars, anything, my father exclaimed, clearly struggling with the concept of having money and not flaunting it. I could, I agreed. But why would I want those things? They would not make me happier or more fulfilled. I looked around at their bewildered faces and decided to address the elephant in the room directly. I have sat here all evening, listening to jokes about my car, my clothes, my perceived lack of ambition and success. I have been offered charity, career help, and financial assistance, all while being mocked for my choices. The question is not why I did not tell you about my success. The question is why that success would change how you treat me as a person and as family. The uncomfortable silence that followed was broken by my father clearing his throat. Well, son, I always knew you had potential. Just was not sure how you were applying it. I raised an eyebrow. Did you? Because 10 minutes ago you were suggesting I needed to grow up and face reality. My mother jumped in. We have always been proud of you, Alfred. We just worried about your future security. My security has never been in question, I replied calmly. But my place in this family apparently was. Each of you has made it clear tonight that status and material wealth are your primary measures of a person's worth. That is your prerogative. But it is not how I choose to live. I turned to Rebecca, whose shocked expression had given way to something more complex. Do you remember our promise in the treehouse? No matter what happens when we grow up, we will always have each other's backs. Rich or poor, successful or struggling. Her eyes glistened with unexpected tears. Alfred, Cameron, ever the opportunist, pulled a business card from his pocket and slid it across the table toward me. We should definitely grab lunch soon. I have some clients who would be very interested in premium aviation services. I left the card on the table untouched. I am not looking for clients, Cameron. I was looking for family tonight. Real family connections based on something deeper than wealth comparisons and status competition. Of course. He backpedaled smoothly. Family first. Always. I just meant down the road, when the timing is right. My mother had recovered enough to shift into damage control mode. Alfred, you must think we are terrible. Of course we love you, regardless of everything. We just did not understand your choices because you never explained them. Should I have needed to explain? I asked quietly. Should my worth as your son and Rebecca's brother be contingent on my bank account? No one had a good answer for that. My father, ever practical, was already mentally revising family history. I always told your mother you were the quiet achiever. Remember, dear? I said Alfred is the type to surprise us all one day. I could not help but smile at this convenient rewriting of the past. Did you? I must have missed that vote of confidence. The dinner party atmosphere had completely transformed. The smug superiority was gone, replaced by an awkward scramble to realign with this new reality where the family member they had been pitying was actually the most financially successful person at the table. We should celebrate properly, my mother suggested, reaching for the champagne. A toast to Alfred's incredible achievements. I raised my hand to stop her. My achievements are not the point. They never were. The point is that they should not matter in how you treat me or anyone else. I looked at each of them in turn. What matters in family relationships, in any relationships really, is respect, support, and genuine care for each other as people, not as status symbols or success metrics. Tonight has shown me that somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that. Rebecca looked genuinely stricken. Alfred, I am so sorry. I got caught up in everything. And I forgot who we used to be to each other. It was the first authentic moment of the evening, and I acknowledged it with a nod. I know. We all change, Becca. I just hope we have not changed so much that we cannot find our way back to what matters. The conversation limped along after that. Everyone trying to navigate this new reality. Cameron made several more attempts to establish a business connection. My parents suddenly recalled numerous instances when they had supposedly recognized my potential. Rebecca sat mostly silent, occasionally meeting my eyes with what seemed like genuine regret. After about 20 minutes of this uncomfortable new dynamic, I decided it was time to go. I should head out. I have an early meeting tomorrow, but we have not even had a proper chance to hear about your business success, my mother protested. Another time, perhaps, I said, standing up. Thank you for dinner. Cameron practically leapt to his feet to shake my hand. Absolutely fascinating evening. I will be in touch about those business opportunities we discussed. My father clapped me on the shoulder with newfound respect. Son, we should grab lunch soon. I would love to hear more about your aviation venture. I nodded non-committally and turned to Rebecca. Congratulations again on your engagement. Something in her eyes had changed, a spark of recognition of the sister I used to know. Alfred, wait. Can I walk you out? As we moved toward the door, Cameron called after us. I will send you a LinkedIn request tonight, Alfred. We should definitely connect. Outside. The night air was cool and refreshing after the stifling atmosphere inside. Rebecca followed me to my Toyota, which now sat between the luxury cars like a deliberate statement rather than an embarrassment. Alfred, she began, her voice catching. I do not even know what to say. You do not need to say anything, Becca. Yes, I do, she insisted, tears now flowing freely, smudging her perfect makeup. I have been awful, competitive, judgmental, fake. Everything we promised we would never be to each other. I leaned against my car, studying my sister's face in the moonlight. What happened to us, Becca? When did appearances become more important than authenticity? She wiped at her tears, leaving black mascara streaks. I do not know. Gradually, I guess. I got caught up in a world where image is everything. Every post, every outfit, every relationship gets measured by likes and status. Somewhere along the way, I started believing it was real. And Cameron, is he real? She looked back at the house, hesitation clear on her face. He has good qualities. He is ambitious, focused. But tonight, seeing how he treated you before and after learning about your success, it showed me something I have been trying not to see. I nodded, understanding more than she realized. You deserve someone who values you for who you are, not what you represent or how you look on Instagram. I know, she whispered. I have known for a while, I think. We stood in silence for a moment, the first comfortable silence of the evening. "I am sorry I did not tell you about the company sale and everything after," I finally said. "I just wanted to be sure that the people in my life were there for the right reasons." "I understand that now," she said, better than I would have this morning. As I opened my car door, Rebecca reached out to touch my arm. "Is it too late for us to get back to being real with each other?" I gave her a genuine smile. "It is never too late for that, Becca." I drove away with mixed emotions, replaying the evening's dramatic shift in my mind. The family dynamics had been exposed in their most raw form. And while the revelation of my wealth had created a spectacle, the more important revelations were about character and values. As the lights of my parents' house faded in the rearview mirror, I felt both drained and strangely hopeful. Perhaps this upending of expectations could lead to something more authentic. Over the next few days, my phone and email were flooded with messages. Cameron sent multiple LinkedIn requests and business proposals. My father called 3 times to suggest golf outings at exclusive clubs he suddenly had access to. My mother texted photos of houses in their neighborhood that were for sale, suggesting I might want to live closer. Rebecca's messages were different, more tentative and genuine. Simple texts, asking how my day was going, sharing a memory from our childhood. No filters or performance. I responded to hers thoughtfully, while letting the others sit unanswered, as I processed what I wanted my family relationships to look like moving forward. I needed time to decide whether the evening's revelations could lead to genuine change, or if they had simply shifted the dysfunction to a new configuration. Despite everything, these were the people who had known me longest in the world. And those bonds, however strained, were not easily dismissed. The days following the dinner were surreal. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications from my family, each person processing the revelation in their own way. Cameron's approach was the most transparent. Within hours, I had received his LinkedIn request, followed by an email outlining potential synergistic business opportunities between his investment banking connections and my aviation company. By morning, he had somehow obtained my cell number and texted, "Great connecting last night. Have some interested parties for luxury aviation services. Lunch this week?" I left it unanswered, curious to see how long his interest would persist without response. My father's strategy was more personal but equally self-serving. "Son, I always knew you had the business gene. Gets it from my side of the family. How about we play 18 holes at Oakmont on Saturday? We can catch up properly, man to man." My mother took yet another approach, alternating between apologies and attempts to reinsert herself into my life through proximity. "Alfred, darling, the Hendersons are selling their home 3 doors down from us. Over 5,000 square feet, beautiful pool. Would not it be wonderful to have you in the neighborhood? Family should be close." The only messages that did not make me cringe came from Rebecca. Unlike the others, she made no requests, pitched no plans, and asked for nothing. Her first text was simple. "I keep thinking about the treehouse promise. I miss who we were then." I let 2 days pass before responding to anyone. I needed space to process the dramatic shift in family dynamics and to decide how I wanted to proceed. There was a part of me that wanted to cut ties completely, to recognize that the conditional acceptance on display was perhaps not worth salvaging. But family bonds are complex, and despite everything, I still held hope that something authentic might be recovered. On the 3rd day, I responded only to Rebecca. "Coffee tomorrow? Just us." Her reply came immediately. "Name the place and time. I will be there." I chose a small, unpretentious cafe in a middle-class neighborhood, deliberately far from the upscale areas where Rebecca typically posted her coffee shop selfies. When I arrived, I was surprised to find her already there, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual designer outfits. Her face was minimally made up, and her hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail. "Hey," she said as I approached, a nervous smile playing at her lips. "Hey yourself," I replied, sliding into the seat across from her. "You look different." She tugged self-consciously at her sweater. "Good different or bad different?" "Real different," I said. "It suits you." The tension in her shoulders eased slightly. "Thanks. I have been doing a lot of thinking since the dinner." We ordered coffee, and when the server left, An awkward silence fell between us. We had been so close once, finishing each other's sentences, communicating with just a look. Now we sat like strangers trying to find common ground. "I ended things with Cameron," she finally said, staring into her coffee cup. I tried to mask my surprise. That was fast. "It was overdue," she admitted. "After seeing how he behaved at dinner, the way he treated you before and after, it crystallized things I had been feeling for months. He is not a bad person, just shallow. Everything is about appearances and connections and status. I realized I was becoming just like him, and I did not like who I was turning into." "That could not have been easy," I said, genuinely impressed by her decisiveness. She gave a small shrug. "Easier than I expected. He immediately started calculating what he was losing in terms of family connections when I explained about your company. That told me everything I needed to know about his priorities. And Mom and Dad? They think I am having a nervous breakdown," she said with a wry smile. "Mom keeps sending me links to couples therapists, and Dad offered to talk to Cameron man to man. They cannot fathom walking away from the social capital of being connected to his family. They will adjust," I offered. "Maybe. Or maybe they will never understand. I am starting to accept that possibility." She looked up from her coffee, meeting my eyes directly. "Alfred, I am so sorry for how I have treated you, not just at dinner, but for years. I got so caught up in crafting this perfect-looking life that I forgot what actually matters, which is real connections. Being known and accepted for who you are, not what you have or how you look." She reached across the table, hesitantly extending her hand. "I miss my brother, the one who knew me better than anyone and loved me anyway." I took her hand, feeling the first genuine connection with my sister in years. "He is still here. Just been waiting for you to come back." We spent the next 2 hours reconnecting. Not as the people we had pretended to be, but as the people we actually were. Rebecca told me about her growing disillusionment with the marketing world she had once been so eager to conquer, her realization that the influencer lifestyle she had cultivated was empty at its core. I shared more details about my business journey, my philanthropic interests, and my deliberately modest lifestyle choices. "Would you come to dinner at my place next week?" I asked as we prepared to leave. "Just a casual thing, no fancy china or imported Wagyu." She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I would love that. Can I bring anything?" "Just yourself, the real one, not the Instagram version." "Deal," she said, and hugged me tightly before we parted ways. The reconnection with Rebecca gave me hope, but I was more cautious about my parents. After another week of increasingly desperate messages from them, I finally replied with an invitation of my own, asking them to dinner at my home the following weekend. They accepted immediately, though my mother could not resist, adding, "We are looking forward to finally seeing your place. I assume you will be moving soon to something more fitting?" I did not bother responding to that part. When they arrived at my modest 3-bedroom home in a nice but ordinary neighborhood, their expressions were a study in confusion and disappointment. My father looked around the living room with its comfortable but unremarkable furniture, as if expecting hidden doors to lead to a secret mansion. "This is cozy," my mother managed, clearly having expected something entirely different. "It is home," I said simply. "Comfortable, functional, and paid for, but surely with your resources." My father began. "My resources give me choices," I interrupted gently. "And I choose this: simple living, strategic investing, and giving back where I can make a difference." I showed them to the dining room, where I had prepared a simple but delicious meal. No elaborate plating or imported ingredients. Just good, honest food, meant for enjoying rather than photographing. "Rebecca mentioned you do charitable work," my mother said as we ate, clearly trying to find her footing in this new reality. "That must be rewarding." It was an opening, however small, and I took it. "It is. Would you like to hear about the educational initiative we launched last year?" To my surprise, they listened with what seemed like genuine interest as I described the program that provided technology, education, and mentorship to kids in underserved communities. By the time I showed them photos of the first graduation ceremony, my mother's eyes were damp. "Those children look so proud," she observed. "And they have reason to be." "They do," I agreed. They worked incredibly hard. It is remarkable what you have built, my father said. And for once, I did not sense he was referring to the financial aspect. Thank you, I said, feeling a tentative bridge being constructed across the chasm that had separated us. The evening was not perfect. Old habits emerged periodically, like when my mother suggested I should let them host a party to introduce you to the right people now that, catching herself before finishing the thought. Or when my father could not resist asking about the profit margins in private aviation. But there were also moments of authentic connection that gave me hope that change, however slow, was possible. As they prepared to leave, my mother hesitated at the door. Alfred, I know we have not always appreciated you as we should have. But I am proud of the man you have become. Not because of your success, but because of how you have handled it. It was not everything, but it was something. A beginning. Thank you, Mom, I said, and meant it. As I watched them drive away, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Cautious optimism about the potential for real change, lingering hurt from years of conditional acceptance, and relief at finally being seen more fully for who I actually was. The journey toward authentic family relationships would not be a straight line, but at least now we were moving in the right direction. Cameron's story had a predictable conclusion. After 2 weeks of unanswered messages, his tone shifted from eager networking to thinly veiled accusations that I was squandering opportunities through lack of ambition, coming full circle to his original assessment, but with a bitter edge. I found it sadly amusing, but chose not to engage. What mattered more was the slow rebuilding of what had once been lost with Rebecca. We established a weekly coffee date where no phones were allowed, gradually rediscovering the connection that had once been so natural between us. She began volunteering with my educational foundation, finding a genuine passion for mentoring young women interested in ethical marketing and authentic brand building. It turns out real fulfillment does not fit in an Instagram square, she told me one day. Who knew? The path forward with my family would be complicated and imperfect, but for the first time in years, it felt grounded in something real. And that, more than any luxury or status symbol, was truly valuable. 1 month after the fateful dinner, Rebecca and I met at our favorite casual cafe, which had become our regular spot for weekly catch-ups. As she approached the table, I noticed again how different she looked from the carefully curated version I had grown used to seeing. Her hair was natural, her clothes stylish but casual, and her smile genuine. The transformation went beyond appearance. There was a lightness to her movements, an authenticity to her expressions that had been missing for years. You would not believe what happened yesterday, she said as she sat down. Mom called to ask if I was sure about not getting back together with Cameron. Apparently, he has been telling everyone I am having some kind of early midlife crisis. I laughed. Let me guess. She suggested a good therapist, too. Actually, Rebecca confirmed with a wry smile. I told her I have never been more certain of any decision, and that my only regret was not making it sooner. How did she take that? Better than I expected. She actually listened when I explained why Cameron and I were fundamentally mismatched. I think she is starting to understand, or at least trying to. Rebecca stirred her coffee thoughtfully. She also asked about you, whether you were seeing anyone. But not in her usual meddling way. She seemed genuinely interested in your happiness. Progress, I observed. Slow, but real. Rebecca nodded. I have been thinking a lot about why I got so lost in that world of appearances. It was not just shallow materialism, though that was part of it. It was insecurity, fear of not measuring up, of every post, every purchase, every relationship became validation that I was enough. The more likes, the more expensive the brand, the more prestigious the connection, the more I could quiet that voice saying I might not be worthwhile on my own. Her candor touched me. And now I am learning that worthiness is not something you earn through external validation. It is inherent. She smiled. I learned that from my big brother, actually. The one who has always been secure enough in himself to drive an old Toyota while owning a fleet of private jets. We spent the next hour discussing her new career direction, focused on authentic brand building for small businesses with ethical practices, and my latest philanthropic project creating technology education centers in rural communities. The conversation flowed naturally, without pretense or performance, just two siblings genuinely interested in each other's lives and perspectives. "I have been meaning to ask," Rebecca said as our meeting wound down. "Would you be willing to have Mom and Dad over to your place again? I think they are really trying to see beyond the material now, and seeing your home and life might help reinforce that." I considered her request. My first dinner with them at my house had been awkward, but ultimately productive. "Sure," I agreed. "But this time, you should come too. Family dinner. Take two, but on my terms." The following weekend, I welcomed my family into my modest home for the second time. This time, Rebecca arrived first, helping me prepare a simple but delicious meal in my unremarkable kitchen. When our parents arrived, they seemed less focused on the house's modest size and more present in the actual moment. "Something smells wonderful," my mother commented, hanging her coat in the closet, without a single remark about the lack of a proper foyer. "Alfred is teaching me his pasta sauce recipe," Rebecca explained. "Turns out I have a brother who can actually cook, and I've been missing out on his skills for years." "Your brother has always been full of surprises," my father said, and this time it sounded like genuine appreciation rather than backhanded criticism. Throughout dinner, I noticed subtle but significant changes in their behavior. My father asked thoughtful questions about my educational foundation without once mentioning tax advantages or networking opportunities. My mother showed genuine interest in my volunteer work, even asking if there might be ways she could contribute. "I was thinking," she said hesitantly. "I taught high school for 20 years. Perhaps I could help with some of the educational programming? If you think I would be useful." The sincere offer touched me deeply. "I think that would be wonderful, Mom. Your experience would be invaluable." After dinner, I gave them a tour of my modest home, including my home office, where pictures of the Educational Foundation's first graduating class were prominently displayed. My mother paused in front of the photos, studying the beaming faces of the students. "You have built something meaningful," she said softly. "Something that will outlast any possession." "That is the goal," I replied. "Your mother and I have been doing some thinking," my father said later as we sat in the living room, "about values, priorities, seeing how you live, what you have chosen to do with your success. It has made us reconsider some things." My mother nodded in agreement. "We got caught up in appearances, in what other people think. Somewhere along the way, we forgot what actually matters." "It is easy to do," I said, thinking of my own journey. "Our culture constantly tells us that more is better, that worth is measured by possessions and status." "But you resisted that," my father observed. "Even with all your success." "Not without effort," I admitted. "It is a daily choice to remember what truly matters." As they prepared to leave, my mother hugged me tightly. "Thank you for not giving up on us, even when we were at our worst." The reconciliation with my family was neither perfect nor complete, but it was genuine. The foundation had been laid for relationships based on mutual respect rather than material comparison. Cameron's story had its own conclusion. A few weeks after Rebecca ended their engagement, he announced on social media that he was dating a minor European aristocrat, his posts carefully tagged to emphasize her title and family connections. Rebecca showed me the announcement over coffee, and we both had to laugh at the transparency of it. "He will never get it," she said, shaking her head. "And I almost married him." "Live and learn," I offered. "Speaking of learning," she replied, "I have been thinking about going back to school. Maybe get a master's in sustainable business practices." "That sounds perfect for you. It feels right," she agreed. For the first time in years, I am making choices based on what actually resonates with me, not what looks good to others. In the months that followed, I watched my sister rediscover herself, shedding the artificial persona she had constructed and embracing authenticity with the same enthusiasm she had once applied to status seeking. She enrolled in her master's program, scaled back her social media to focus on genuine connections, and even started dating a high school history teacher whose passion for education matched her newly rediscovered values. My parents' transformation was slower but equally meaningful. My mother began volunteering at our foundation's education center once a week, bringing decades of teaching experience to students hungry for knowledge and mentorship. My father, after initial resistance, found unexpected fulfillment in helping teach financial literacy to young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. I spent decades chasing status. He confided in me one day after a particularly successful workshop. But I have never felt as accomplished as when I see these kids grasp concepts that will help them build their own futures. As for me, the experience reinforced what I had always believed. True wealth lies in authenticity, meaningful work, and genuine connections. The freedom to live according to your own values rather than external expectations is the greatest luxury of all. I still drive my reliable Toyota. My home remains modest, but comfortable. My company continues to thrive, as does the educational foundation that has become my true passion. The difference is that now my family understands and respects these choices instead of judging them. The journey toward authentic family relationships is ongoing, with occasional setbacks and old patterns that resurface in moments of stress or insecurity. But the foundation has shifted from conditional acceptance based on external achievements to genuine appreciation of each other as complete human beings, flaws and all. If there is a lesson in all of this, it is that money reveals character rather than creating it. It amplifies who we already are and what we truly value. The dinner that began with mockery and ended in revelation did not change anyone fundamentally. What it did was pull back the curtain on values and priorities that had been present all along, forcing each of us to confront the gap between who we claim to be and who we actually were. True success is not measured by possessions accumulated, but by lives touched, by the impact we have on others, by the authenticity with which we move through the world. And real wealth? That is found in the freedom to be fully yourself without apology or pretense, surrounded by people who value you for who you are, rather than what you have. I still believe in keeping my success private in most contexts, but I have learned that complete secrecy can be its own form of inauthenticity when it comes to those closest to us. The balance lies in sharing enough to be known truthfully, while ensuring that material success remains the least interesting thing about you. As I look toward the future, I feel hopeful about my family's journey toward more authentic connections. The path is neither straight nor perfect, but it is genuine, and that makes all the difference. What about you? Have you ever had to navigate complicated family dynamics, or been judged for choices others did not understand? How do you balance privacy with authenticity in your own relationships? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their worth is not determined by their bank account or job title. Thank you for listening. And remember, true wealth is measured by the authenticity of your connections, not the size of your possessions.